Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Star Wars Jedi Battle Scars by Sam Maggs. This is a new release. This book just came out last week as you're watching this, a week ago yesterday, and I picked it up and was able to read it after release day, and I have many thoughts about it. The first thing I have to preface is I'm not a video game person, so I have not played the Jedi Fallen Order game. I have seen clips of it, but I have not actually played the game at all. So this is not coming from a hardcore gamer. This is, however, coming from a hardcore reader. I have read every Star Wars canon novel that's been released, a young adult and adult, and I've read a lot of the middle grade as well. So I've read a lot of Star Wars. So this is coming from the reader perspective, not a gamer perspective. I'd recommend checking out the gamers for their impressions, but I think I understand the game and the concept of the series quite well. When I was reading this book, the whole time, all I could think about were the technical aspects of it. Sometimes I do that with a book where I'm like, oh my goodness, the author did this technical aspect so good, or the author did this technical aspect so good. Unfortunately, I spent almost the entirety of this book thinking, man, the technical aspect here was done terribly. Man, this could have been fixed. So many issues in this book could have been fixed, and the skeleton of a story could have been retained. Doing a Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor related book is a brilliant idea. Doing a full cast book with an Inquisitor is a great idea, but the execution is really bad here, and it's painful for me to say that. So let me go through all the different areas of discussing what's the problem in this book to explain why I'm going to give it a lower rating than I normally give books. So first of all is the pacing and design of the story. Most books have a general 3-act plot. And this book actually does have a 3-act plot. But here's the problem. Your acts have to be relatively closely paced. This book, it is not. The first act takes place over about 100 pages, roughly, maybe 105 pages. Then Act 2 takes place about 130 pages. So that's it's a pretty sizable act. Act 3 is roughly 40 pages. It's only about 3 chapters long. It's super quick. Things just happen, up, we're done. And it is a very poorly paced. There's not enough payoff in the third act. Everything's too rushed. It feels like they were just rushing to get this book out in time. And because of that, this book suffers because it's so uneven. You can tell a shorter Star Wars novel. This is only about 270 pages. Goodreads will say 300 pages. It's lying. It's about 273 pages. So it's one of the shorter Star Wars canon novels. And I actually looked through my shelf of the hardcover novels for canon. If you exclude novelizations, which I think are in a camp of their own, this is the third shortest adult novel in the canon, and they're all relatively close. The other two that are shorter than it are just barely shorter than it, maybe by like 10 pages or maybe 15 pages shorter. But it's one of the shortest canon novels thus far. And you can totally feel that because the book just goes by too fast. And sometimes when you're reading a book, you're going, oh my goodness, this is such a breeze, I'm just enjoying this. But the problem here is that, this is just missing so much that could have happened. And I'll get into what that stuff specifically is in a minute. But that's the problem with this book, is it goes by too fast and it doesn't have a completeness that it is supposed to. The third act should have been longer, and you could have taken a little bit out of Act 2 and maybe tacked it on and used that page count, but really, this book should have been minimum 300 pages and should have had more time towards the end of Act 2 leading into Act 3 that would have given the characters the proper payoff, and Act 3's climax should have been longer. The climax in Act 3 is way too short for a Star Wars novel. Maybe for like a middle grade book that's an accurate length climax, but not for an adult novel. Going into the other problem I have with this book is the focus. As the marketing or the cover would suggest, this is a full cast book. You got Cal, you got Seer, you got Marin, you got the full cast, Grask, the full cast of the Stinger Mantis. And in the video game, the absolute lead main character is Cal Kestis. So it would be understandable if you assumed that this was going to really be about the full cast. And you would be right to assume that Cal was the main perspective, especially when you read the blurb on the front flap. When you open the book up and you read the flap, the blurb focuses on Cal as the point of view character. The problem is, this is not a full cast book. This is a Merrin book. Merrin is the viewpoint character for a majority of the book. It just so happens that the other characters are present and occasionally get a little bit of viewpoint characters. But it's not balanced, and it's not marketed properly. If they had just had Merrin and the Inquisitor on the book, or really just Merrin on the book cover, I think that it would have been more accurate in its marketing. And also, if Merrin had been mentioned in the blurb instead of just Cal. Now, I understand why Lucasfilm and Random House Worlds felt the necessity to include the full cast. The full cast brings in a wider audience. It really sells the idea that this is connected to the game. Everyone knows Cal from the game, so everyone's going to think, oh, it's a book about Cal Kestis. So from a marketing perspective, I understand why they did it, but it is bound to create angry fans when you promise something and don't truly deliver. It just becomes so frustrating to assume that you're getting something and then you really aren't getting that. On a technical level, Lucasfilm could argue, well, Cal is in the book. Yes, he is, but he's not the main character. Also, when he's written, he is the sideline character. He is kind of sidelined. So that's a big problem I have with the book, is the focus is not where it should have been. And I think had the book's focus been on Cal, I think that would have been a lot more interesting. I know why they did it for Merrin, but it is frustrating. The other part of the problem is that the biggest character in terms of space on the book is the fifth brother, the Inquisitor, and he is the villain of this book, but he is in it so little that it is really frustrating marketing. I actually think that they should not have included him on the cover because of how little he's in it. He is in like half a scene midway through, and then in Act 2, he's in a full scene, a full chapter, and then in Act 3, he's in a full chapter. And that's it. That's all that the Inquisitor is in this book. He is not a present force hounding them. You're not cutting to him often. He's literally in just like 2 action sequences and a little bit of like a scene earlier on. And that's it. So he does not have much page time. So there really is not a really true good villain throughout this book, which is a problem. There is another character who becomes a kind of antagonistic character towards the end, but they're not fully set up there. And so I really think that general people who are reading this are gonna get so frustrated, assuming you're getting a lot of Inquisitor and you're not, assuming you're getting a lot of Cal and you're not. It really is a Merrin book plus the new characters. Sam Maggs obviously really wanted to write about the new characters, and so that's and Merrin. That's why they take the main focus. And that gets to another significant criticism I have is this is what I think is going to be a very big point of contention in the fandom, specifically the video game fandom, is the romantic relationship in this book. Regardless of your politics, which I think that people on all sides of the politics will agree with this, is that we were going into the next video game expecting a certain relationship to happen. And that is absolutely not what you get here. The author leaves an opportunity for that relationship to continue. Specifically, I'm referring to Cal and Merrin shippers. I believe that the author is leaving the opportunity open that if in the video game they decide to do that, they could. But the problem is that this book focuses on Merrin having a relationship with someone else. And because of that, it's bound to make people frustrated because no one was shipping her and this other person, and there are a lot of people shipping her with Cal. And so I think it's bound to create frustration among fans, as I said, regardless of political beliefs. It's bound to create frustrations when they have the expectation of where it's going and the author takes it somewhere else. And I understand that maybe an author, they want to take a character's relationship in a direction they want to go. That's understandable when you're telling an original story. But there is an obligation when you're doing media tie-in fiction. You are writing to a fandom. There is an established fandom that's reading your books. You want them to keep reading the books, and so you have to deliver a little bit to the fandom. And when you subvert expectations, when you take something away and instead you take it in a direction that fandoms A isn't expecting but B doesn't want, you are naturally going to create a backlash. And so there's going to be a lot of people that throw out the criticism of this book because people are going to talk about the politics of the relationship that she's in. But the real criticism of the book isn't even in that. It's in the way that you treat the fans with this. So I find that very frustrating. When you are a media tie-in author, there is a way you have to deal with everything. And this book does not handle its fans properly. I will also just briefly touch on the fact that the MacGuffin in this book is not excellently written. It's kind of vague, and in the book, it's kind of made a joke out of, and the author kind of explains away why it's not explained well. And that was a very poor decision in the writing. I think the MacGuffin needed a lot more payoff and a lot more importance and specificity. The more vague you make something, the harder it is for the fandom to get behind it, I think. But I don't want this review to be a wholesale hate fest because I don't think this is the most horrible book I've read. I actually have some praises to give the book. So why don't I talk about some praises first? First, I thought the character of Grease was handled well. I thought he was funny. I thought he was interesting. I thought his voice felt the most unique. I thought that Grease felt like an original character, and it felt like a real personality, and his personality came through well. So I liked Grease, how he was written here. I will also say that there are some action sequences in Act 2 that were really written pretty well and were very exciting. And there was one sequence in Act 3 that I thought was written very well. So I did like that. But overall, that's about much I can say in terms of my praises. I will also say Cal was not written well throughout the book, he had moments that were great. The moments where he's talking about protecting others and fighting, and he and Marin are arguing about throwing one of their lives out there to protect the other one. When he's doing that, Cal is great. But that's about the only time Cal was okay in the book. Otherwise, he was sidelined and he was just, not written well at all. But to give, the bar is really low here because it's not the worst canon novel we've gotten because really the book Ronin, the Visions novel, is the one Star Wars book in recent years that I detested and I couldn't stand at all in any shape or form. That book is not technically part of the canon. And so if I do that, the only other book that I would place lower than this is either Queen's Hope or maybe Midnight Horizon, the one by Daniel Jose Older for the New High Republic, which I love the High Republic, but not that novel. So this is unfortunately on the low end for Star Wars books for me. It is what I think one of the weakest canon novels to date. And I think that they could have been fixed. So many of the problems could have been fixed. It is a coherent story in that the progression makes sense in the book. But it's just not written well, if that makes sense. And I think this could have really been fixed. And the last comment I'll make on the book is that there is I think a thematic connection between the main plot of this book and also the plot and story and characters of Casablanca. And hearing Star Wars and Casablanca isn't always the best mix, but if you read this book and you've seen Casablanca, you will 100% understand why I am making those connections. And I would really like to see someone write an essay on that one day. I'm not going to write it because I can't write that. But I'd like to see someone write that Casablanca connection. But that's my review of Jedi Battle Scars. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, didn't like it. But I would give it a 4 out of 10. And that's me being generous. A 4 out of 10 is me being generous. So that's a 2 out of 5. So if you've read Jedi Battle Scars and what did you think of it? Did you enjoy it or did you feel frustrated like I did? Let me know those thoughts in the comments section down below. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.